Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod, and I am your Life Mastery Coach and author of the book, A Life to Die For. This is episode 159, and today our topic is brave words, courageous actions. Now, I'd like to remind everyone here that this is a live presentation, so if you're on as a live observer, please remember to participate by putting your questions and comments in the chat, and anything that you share that we will certainly try and comment on it during the course of our conversation. So I think most people agree that our world is in need of healing right now. The problem is that many of us, I'm afraid a lot of us, fall into a class of people that we've called the silent majority. And part of our plan today is to try and change that. We want more people to speak up. And so maybe you're one of those people who tends to stay silent. There's a lot of different reasons why you might do this. Maybe you're just not aware of any problems in the world, or things are just fine and dandy for you. Or maybe you imagine that things will take care of themselves. Or maybe you are so overwhelmed with the demands of life that you just have little time to spare for idealistic pursuits. On the other hand, you might believe that your ideas have no merit. And that certainly has been my challenge at different times in my life. Or maybe you just don't see how you can make a difference in the world. Or maybe you're just afraid to speak up and rock the boat. Well, if any of these scenarios describe what you might be going through, I want to just thank you for being here and thank you for listening if you're listening to the recording, because I think you're going to find this to be a pertinent discussion. And I've invited a good friend and writer extraordinaire to return to Life Mastery TV and to bring some of her, quote, badass wisdom around bringing your voice into the world. Today's guest is the owner of Brave Healer Productions and a powerhouse who writes in order to feng shui her soul. I never knew that was a verb, but now I do. She's a 13-time published poet and author, an inspirational speaker, a holistic physical therapist, and, watch out now, 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo with over 2 decades of experience in healing. She was born to build a revolution of brave healers who are getting their authentic voices published in order to heal the world with their words. So please welcome the queen of badassery, my good friend, Laura Franco, to today's program. Welcome, Laura. Thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you. I'll take that title. I like it.
Well, you probably could find a domain with that name, and I would recommend grabbing it if it resonates for you.
I think I might need to rush off and do that. Yes.
Well, I don't think anybody else is going to steal it, but go for it, baby, because yeah. And I want to say I've known you for, I guess, about a year now, and maybe a little bit longer than that. I think I met you, was it at the April Soul Treat? I can't remember.
That sounds right.
Yeah, so yes. It's longer than a year now.
Or in person, at least we got to meet then, but we knew each other before that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. And I was just very impressed with the way you carry yourself, the way you encourage people, and the way you help people to find their voice. And so that's part of the reason that I've wanted you here, both times that you've come. And I guess for people who don't know who you are, I wonder if you could just take a little time, share a bit of your story about how it is that you ended up on this path of helping people to find their voice. I assume it had something to do with finding your own voice, but that's just me guessing. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Well, thanks. And really, thanks for having me again. I love having these conversations and really just kind of piquing the awareness of the listener. Just if they think of something in a little bit different way, I feel like we did our job, But holistic physical therapy was my career choice from the beginning. And I'm so happy to look back on that choice today and, just be glad for it. I went into it to help people feel better, literally, physically, mostly. And I didn't realize until, somewhere down the path that the mental, emotional piece of that, if we weren't integrating everything together, we weren't really addressing that whole person. And I've been journaling since I was a teenager, but got a little bit more interested in writing when I was blogging for my first business. My own business opened up in 2008. And as I started to do that writing, it felt so freeing to be able to tell my stories and educate people at the same time. And it was just such a great feeling to me. It was kind of a two-way street, win-win. I was having a therapeutic effect of doing my own writing. And then, of course, I was helping people by giving them ideas about how to heal their body and mind and soul. And I went on that whole period of time, and we're talking 30-year history here. I knew I wanted to write a book. If you ask my friends and family, they would tell you that I talked about it all the time. It just never happened until it happened in 2012. And that was really the beginning of, I think, your question of finding that voice in a bigger way. It was slightly terrifying to hit publish on that very first book, but it was kicking the pebble for me, and it's been an incredible journey ever since.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I can certainly resonate with a lot of what you say, because I've done a lot of technical writing in my time, and technical writing is easy. You're just teaching people how to do something. I mean, that's my judgment anyway. It's just easy. But writing something that comes from the heart, I find that's much more challenging. This may be true for a lot of people. For me, it was because, wow, if I reveal this, it's going to be out there. It's going to be out there in public, and I can't take it back once it's out there. So is that something I really truly want to do? So I think that was part of the thing that held me back for a while in writing. Did you have that experience too?
I think that really was sort of the catalyst for the Brave Healer way of writing. It was really feeling down deep that sharing the authentic stories was something that was really important. But when you've been taught and conditioned to understand maybe that that's wrong and not the way to do it, TMI, too personal, too something, right? You build and develop that belief that that's not the kind of writing a professional should be doing. And the more I wrote, the more it came from that deeper place in me. And the more, of course, I got some feedback about how that helped people, the more that encouraged me to move forward. But yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. I went through that, especially doing the first book, and getting, writing it is one thing. But then when you go publish and it is out and the world can read it, right? And first of all, you're just afraid that nobody's reading it but your mom. And then when you realize that more people than your mom are reading it, it starts to feel a little bit more scary. And you're like, oh, shoot, what did I write again?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so far, that's been really the foundation on which I have moved forward into helping other people share their authentic stories. Because honestly, the more personal, the more universal.
Yeah, that's an amazing and kind of counterintuitive idea.
Yeah.
I think that most people think if I make this too personal, no one's going to relate to it.
Right.
And yet, as you say, the more personal I make it, the more people can relate to it. It's counterintuitive, and that's a beautiful thing to remember. So I just want to reiterate that. The more personal, the more universal.
Because you're specifically speaking to the individual who had the experience. And the more specific and personal it was, usually you'll have people, getting a little whiplash, nodding their head at you, like, me
Exactly.
too. Yeah. Like, how did you know? How were you in my head?
Right,
we've lived the same life. I've gotten so many comments about that. The more personal I got about things that have happened. And listen, we're not here to trash people in our personal writing. That was my main goal, was to write these stories in a way that I would never regret the words being out loud in the world. I was never in the energy of trashing anybody, putting anyone down. It always came from my truth and my telling of my own story. And that is how I moved through some of the hardest stories that I've written about.
Yeah. So what you're really talking about there is something that I teach in my own work around what I call empowered communication. That means to me speaking only for myself. I use I statements all the time. Some people get irritated by it when I do that, because I can't say anything about you. Anything I say about you is just a thought in my head. It's my judgment. It's my projection. It's my imagination. It's a hallucination. It's all those things. It may be true, but it's still just my projection. And therefore, when I'm speaking with people, it's my responsibility, I think, to use I statements and to speak only from my own personal perspective. When someone else is speaking, then it's my responsibility to listen and not take it on as something that has to do with me, although I may empathize and resonate with some of what I'm hearing, and I can support them in that way. So that's what I call, that's just a very, very, very short description, and I really want to do a full-blown course on this because I think it's really important. But I think that's what you're talking about here. When you share your story, what you're telling us is about your experience, what happened for you. And those of us who can relate to that because we've had the same experience, we have one kind of resonance. Those of us who maybe didn't have exactly the same experience, we can still have a different kind of resonance with your story because we empathize with what you went through. And that's where I think the word universal comes in. Even if I didn't have the experience, I can still resonate with what you were talking about.
Definitely. Or, may have had a similar, maybe not exact, but close enough type of experience. And, getting words on the paper in many instances, you are your own witness in those moments. Right. And there is, you have a moment of healing, literally, when you look down at that paper and you're reading that back to yourself. I've found that moment is extremely therapeutic. Whether or not anyone reads it, you can be that for yourself. But yes to everything you said about telling your personal truth and having that be the most important thing. Yeah,
I think that's the only way we can speak and communicate in a successful manner that isn't going to impose things on other people. The moment I start using you statements and start pointing my finger, I am disowning the truth of who I am, and I'm trying to put it all on you. Yeah. And that's I think the cause, one of the big causes of all the problems that we have in our world today.
Yeah, exactly. That would probably be a foundational one. Yes.
That's right.
When you take responsibility for this kind of awareness, that's badass. That's a ninja move, on the awareness, and it does change the world. So I think it's, we're not talking about a small potatoes thing there. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so here's something that I've noticed for me in my life. I've seen some of the stuff that you've written. I've got one or two of your books, and I've also participated with you in the latest Wellness Universe book called The Complete Guide to Self-Care, I believe, the 25 Tips for Stress Relief or whatever. I'm not sure if I've got the title correct, but
You're pretty close. That's good.
Anyway, it's been really fun to do that. And as I read people's stories, I find, and your story too, by the way, and I know you've got lots of them, I find, wow, this person has so many amazing stories. And I think about my life and I say, how many stories do I have that people are going to be interested in? And the problem is this is the way I think a lot of people think. I lived it. It was no big deal. It wasn't that important. That's how I downplay my own experiences, so that when it comes time to finding a story that relates to something I want to teach, I have a hard time. How do you coach people through that kind of challenge? How do you remind them that no matter how you might downplay your story, it's important to somebody else? How do you do that?
Holy moly, this paralyzes people faster than anything else, than any other self-sabotaging inner critic message. It's the one that says, my story isn't good enough, nobody's going to like it. And listen, you have to sort of wake up inside of what you're doing when you do that to yourself, that limitation you're putting on yourself. And it's not about you anymore, really. Because let's say you share your boring story with the world and you help one person. One person listens and their mind is changed by something, some way that you said it, that only exactly you can say it. Then isn't it worth it, right? So I kind of am a little hardcore on that kind of inner critic BS, because that's another, you gotta develop your ninja moves, and that's one of them.
Right.
And so waking up inside of, oh yeah, there goes that message again. Okay, well, I'm here to help people, so I'm going to share the story anyway,
Right.
And you have to really move through it to the action taking, because you can get stuck in the thoughts, oh man, all day long.
Well, and that's so true. I mean, just to give you one very, very simple example. I mean, when I was in the Canadian military, one of my experiences was to become a fighter pilot. And, to me, that's just something that happened in my life, It never occurs to me that just saying those words could have an impact on somebody. I'm not going through the whole detail of how I became a fighter pilot or the challenges that I went through or any of that stuff, because it was just part of my life experience, But saying fighter pilot, I watch people's eyes go like this. Really?
Like, what?
How many people do they know who are fighter pilots? I don't think of it that way.
Right.
And that's just the thing. It's not that I'm afraid to say that I was a fighter pilot. I mean, I have no problem with that. I can brag about all kinds of things that I've done in my life. But I guess in my thinking, it's more like, yeah, I did that. It was a good thing. It was a fun experience. I got a lot out of it. And now here I am today.
I don't think it's so much about the story itself. I think it's about the story in the timeline of your life, where you look back on the moments, and you'll have several if you really look at that whole timeline. It's about the ones that made you who you are today and align with how you're helping people moving forward today. So if I lined up all, the 50 some odd stories I have over my timeline, I am not going to pick all of them to share. Sure. But I am going to pick the one or two that line up exactly with what my mission is, right now. But I would definitely pick fighter pilot. I would put that on.
Well, I've got lots of little stories in there, and it wasn't until I joined Toastmasters that somebody challenged me to write a speech about that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then when I did, I couldn't believe the response I got. It surprised me.
I mean, it's exciting to people that not everybody gets to be a fighter pilot. That is one of the things, right? You have to be a certain person physically and mentally to be able to achieve that role.
Right.
And you have to understand that. Why do we knock ourselves down, or really we don't recognize that we've done these incredible things?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if, all right, so the fighter pilot thing might seem a little exotic for some people, but it doesn't have to be exotic.
Yeah.
Maybe your story in your mind sounds real simple. Like, I learned how to, how to create a garden that requires no pesticides.
Yeah.
All right. On the outside, since you've already done it, it may sound boring to you, but I'm already interested. I want to hear about how that happened. How did you learn that? And that's the thing that people need to understand, is that everyone out there really is interested in your story. Unless, of course, that's all you do is just, barrage them with stories. Then they're going to tell you to shut up. But when it's your turn to speak, they do want to hear your story.
Yes. Completely agree. And it doesn't really matter what it is. And it doesn't have to be exotic or crazy or wild or even, I've heard, wellness and healer professionals say, oh, well, my story isn't bad enough compared to these stories. Yeah, these people have been through these major traumas. Well, my thing was just so whatever. Oh my goodness, that's another one that, drives me nuts.
Right.
Everybody's story has a worth because you just don't know who's listening and who it can help. From the gardening to whatever,
Yeah.
to astronaut, who knows?
Right. Well, and these stories that we have, and now when I'm shifting the meaning of the word story, but when I say inside here that people are just going to be bored, I'm not going to waste their time. That is a story that I am making up in my head right now.
Yeah, well, now we're shifting story definition. Yeah.
Correct. And that story is totally boring.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And that's one of your, bullshit things that you were talking about earlier. So I want to first of all, I want to tell people that we all have those stories in our heads. I don't think there's a person alive who doesn't hear those voices now and then. And it's okay. You're just a human being. So please don't blame yourself or make yourself wrong for having those stories. But recognize that they're not true stories. They're false stories given to you by your ego mind because it's trying to protect you against some of these weird things that it thinks are unsafe, that maybe aren't unsafe at all. There might be a little risk involved, but it's not going to hurt you. And it might make you feel a little uncomfortable only because you're outside your comfort zone. So listen to what Laura has to say about these stories and how you can actually transform them. I'm just putting you on the spot there, Laura.
Well, listen, we've got this survival kind of fear that keeps us safe and alive. Right. And we have something I call purpose-driven fear. And the fear of not good enough is boring, and it's a purpose-driven fear. And
so would you tell us what you mean by that? What exactly do you mean by a purpose-driven fear?
Well, you described it a little bit when you said, we're still safe. It's not like we're feeling like we're going to die in the dark alley type of survival fear. But the problem is inside of our body, it feels like that. Your first time stepping on a stage, that kind of fear. And you're about to talk to the world about your message and your purpose, and you are like terrified to do the public speaking thing. That's right. Purpose-driven fear. You have a purpose to speak your message out loud to more people and help them with your message, right? Purpose-driven kinds of feeling. Okay. Yeah, so you're not gonna. No, I haven't seen anyone die on stage yet. But it feels the same, and you got to differentiate inside of you. Like, is this something I really want to do? Yes. Is this something that's going to improve me, help me learn and evolve and grow? Yes. Might I make a mistake or possibly fail? Yeah, but who cares? Because that's a stepping stone toward where I want to be. So you're not going to get to where you want to be unless you make more mistakes, unless you go risk it and move through that purpose-driven fear and actually do the things. So that's a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's great. And so now you have a client, let's say, who is expressing one of these purpose-driven fears while you're trying to encourage him or her to write a book or maybe just write a little story. How are you going to help them work through that fear?
The foundational tool is just to get them in touch with their body, do a body awareness kind of exercise, a meditative kind of exercise where they can move out of that thinking mind and into a deeper grounded connection with their higher self and intuition. Because when you're connected there, words will move through without you trying. You'll channel your book. And I used to not be able to use that word because it freaked me out a little bit until I connected long and hard enough and it started happening and I surprised myself. So if you just move out of your own way and connect with that inner self and stop thinking so much about, we're making this mean something extra. And that's the problem, rather than just listening to that voice inside and what the message is that wants to move through. This gets back a little bit to the I write to feng shui my soul, because I do have to clear a space. Some of that stuff isn't going to be what I share. Some of it is just going to be the therapeutic stuff that needs to come out of me. So I can literally clear the space, like decluttering. You know, you're cleaning the space, clearing the space so that there is energy flow, right? So I guess basic answer for me is clearing my mind and coming into my body connection so I can listen to the intuition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Right. So I guess most of these messages that people have in their heads boil down to something like, they might say my story is not good enough, but I think at a deeper level they're really saying I don't matter, or I'm not good enough.
Definitely, it's I'm not good enough. That's what that is. Yeah.
Right. And of course, this is something that's been conditioned into us for, a large part of our lives. We are told from the time we're born that we have to pay attention to an outside authority figure, that we can't really trust ourselves to grow, to learn, to have any wisdom. And so we just naturally start to believe that we're not good enough. That just happens as a result of the indoctrination, if you like, that I don't know, it's like brainwashing that happens to us when we're little kids. And I don't want to blame our parents for this. I mean, they're just doing what they think is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so I want to love them for that.
Yes.
At the same time, this is part of our journey, I think, is we go through this wounding process that we then have to find ways of healing that wounding. We have to come into ourselves. We have to break out of that pattern that was put upon us, and that takes time. For some of us, in my case, for example, it might take 50 or 60 years.
Exactly.
For some people, it might take, you might have someone who's very young and also very wise who gets that very early on in their life and becomes like the Dalai Lama or something like that,
Yeah, there are examples of all kinds of people moving through that journey at different speeds. You know how I figured this one out? I got through a couple of decades of my life, maybe more than a couple. And I felt like I had checked off all the boxes of everything that I was supposed to do to make me happy, everything that I was taught that should make me successful and happy. And I got to the end of all those check boxes being checked, and I was standing there in the middle of my life wondering why I still felt unhappy.
Right. That was the one checkbox you couldn't fill in.
And it's exactly what you said, is that I never really asked myself what made me happy. I was just following everyone else's rules about it until the day I woke up to that and started asking myself the questions. What do you really want? What do you really desire? What turns you on? And, I don't know that anyone had really asked me those things before. So it was up to me to figure that out.
Well, and not only did you have to figure it out, you had to figure out how to ask yourself the questions.
Exactly. That's the awareness. That's the ninja move, David.
There you go. Yeah. And that's something that somewhere along the way, I got that. I grokked this notion of you just got to ask the right question. I don't know where I learned that. I can't remember. But one day it hit me, and now I just very carefully try to ask the right question. And I try to ask my questions without saying why do you do this, or why, because the why question tends to put us into a kind of defensive posture. We're immediately going into, well, the fact that you asked me why suggests that you have a judgment about me, therefore I have to protect myself and defend my actions. Whereas if you ask me, how is this creating whatever you want in your life? Or if you wanted happiness, how would you go about doing it? Or what might you do? So if you ask the right questions and they're preceded with the appropriate interrogative word, other than why, and not even who, I would say, but although sometimes I've asked myself, who would you be if?
I find
that a powerful question. If you didn't have this fear, or if you didn't believe this limiting belief. Who would you be without that belief? I think I got that question from Byron Katie. I think that's one of her questions. So there are powerful questions that we can ask. And I think that's one of the things that you do very, very well. You ask questions like that. You ask them of yourself and you ask them of your clients.
Yeah, the questions are a game changer. And the whys get you into analyzing mode again, right back into that overthinking, right, rather than the how creates a curiosity and an openness for that answer. That might be that strategy. One of my favorites is what else is possible right now? What else is possible, right? When you're feeling a little funky, little down, little low about something that's going on, just the pause, the breath again, the body connection, and then what else is possible here? I like that one a lot.
Yeah, I like that. What else is possible? Yeah. And, there's another thing. Sometimes I think a useful judgment that I have occasionally is when I notice a thought in my head, rather than judging it, I say, oh, isn't that interesting?
I like that one too. I use that.
Oh, isn't that interesting? So
that's
it's
a
not
joke
really
in my
judging it.
family.
I'm just noticing when I say interesting, I kind of create that energy of curiosity that you were just talking about.
Yep. That one's a joke in my family. So my mom and my sister and I, that's the thing. So if we're faced with something where we're all kind of like looking at each other like, did that really just happen? Or, some sort of shocker, we'll just do this like, huh. That's interesting. Right. Yeah. And that immediately changes the vibe, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. So I want to ask you, I want to shift gears completely here for a second. I want to find out more about this black belt thing that you do, this Taekwondo stuff. I mean, obviously you didn't just, sign up for Taekwondo one day and suddenly end up with a 3rd degree black belt. You obviously have put some time and energy into this. Tell us a little bit about what that process looked like.
Yeah. So let me tie it into something I told you a few minutes back. About that first book that I knew I had in me and then finally wrote in 2012 called Living, Healing, and Taekwondo. And that book was the story of my son and I. He was 5.5 at the time that we started Taekwondo together. We had been looking for an activity for him to do, just fun stuff. And we went and watched a class. We walked out of the class at the end and I kind of looked down at him and said, well, you gonna do it? And he looked up at me and said, I'll do it if you do it. And 6 years later, we earned our black belts together. He was the youngest in the school at the time at 11. And I was, I think, 38 when I started that journey. So I've been training for about 14 years. He did not continue. I did. And so I went on to earn my 2nd degree and then my 3rd degree. And honestly, just kind of the short story of the martial art journey is that it is a mind, body, soul journey, and it's a lifestyle. In the lifestyle for me is one of the tenets of Taekwondo is an indomitable spirit. Mm-hmm. And I think that one phrase kind of says it all. You're a warrior because you show up every day and you practice. Right. And it's been a very, very cool part of my life.
That's awesome. I think that's great. So 14 years you've been doing it, and but it took you 6 years to get to your first black belt.
Correct. We've been in a very traditional school with Master Holloway, who was head of the Olympic team once upon a time. Old school Taekwondo guy that, used to spar without any gear on and had broken bones and all that crazy stuff. And you train and you earn the black belt. You don't get your black belt. We learned that very quickly in our school. And so, it did take several years to finally earn that black belt and that honor, to wrap that black belt around your waist for the first time. But what happens that day? You figure out what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like going all the way back to the beginning again and realizing that you still have so much ahead of you to learn. And that learner's mindset, that kind of curiosity we were talking about, it's a game changer, really.
All right. So now I'm curious about, I assume that you continued doing your Taekwondo at the same rate that you had been doing it before. Is that right?
It's petered out over the years, and that's a great question because I was competing at one point. I'm almost 53, so just, you guys can do the math of when I started at 38 and what might have happened to my body in that amount of time. But I was competing, and we were full on geared up, full sparring, to the head, to the body. So that is not something that I really choose to do anymore. For lots of different reasons. But the practice itself, the fitness piece of it, the mind body, I don't know if you guys have heard about the martial arts. There are forms that you practice, choreographed sets of moves, and they go from the beginning, number one, all the way up through the degrees of belt. And the further you go, the more forms you have to learn and practice and memorize. And it's funny that you asked this particular question because that one piece of Taekwondo has been one of my favorite pieces that I've continued through, even though I've backed off on some of the hardcore body stuff in class. But the sad story is that COVID kind of ruined the class environment for us. And so a lot of my practice is in my home. So you do what you can do until it gets going again.
Right. So so now I want to tie this back to your writing. Obviously, you used your Taekwondo maybe as a starting point to write a book or to actually complete a book. But what else has it done for you in terms of, becoming a better writer, becoming a better teacher, becoming I don't even like to use the word better. The word better implies that you weren't good enough in the first place, and that's just simply wrong.
But you master your craft of writing.
That's probably a better way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't, you just get better until you die, so that's part of like that learner's mindset.
Right.
There's always something to know, to get better at, to grow with, to evolve with. But, I think the better answer, if you want me to tie the two together, is about the fear. It really is more about the fear, because training in the martial arts alongside men and women of all different ages, sizes, and abilities, and being able to hold my own in those groups of people and in the sparring matches and in the competitions when we were in that stage of things, and even just showing up to class even though you don't feel like it, that type of stuff.
Right.
Or you're afraid of this or that or whatever. That has really been the biggest thing. Like, you figure out what you're made of in there. And that then corresponds to a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get through your black belt test, then you can basically do anything. And I didn't mention that was a 9-hour test.
Wow.
And so by the end of that time, if you don't have some mental practice, you will not finish it. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's physical. Of course, you had to last the 9 hours. But if you don't figure it out in the end of those 9 hours, it's all up here. Has nothing to do with your body. Your body's in a fantastic shape at that point, right? And so you got to get over your fear of being able to move through things, your fear of being seen, your fear of losing, your fear of failure, right? So yeah, that's, I think, the true tie in there. The writing now, maybe because of all of that, I feel like I've moved out of perfectionism because of this. I know that I can help people by sharing my story, but I cannot help people if I'm stuck in perfectionism and not publishing my writing.
Yeah.
It's not going to help anyone if it's not out loud. So if I'm paralyzed by my own not good enough fear, that's the failure.
Right. I think the way I would encapsulate what you just said is do it anyway.
Yes, you have to do it with the feeling of fear inside of you. Yeah. You
That's
don't
right.
get courageous or clear or confident first, you guys. You don't
That's right.
feel those things first. If you're waiting around to feel confident enough to do something, you might be waiting forever. You
Well,
have
and
to do
I'm
it.
glad you brought this up, because what I think is courage doesn't even exist in the absence of fear. I mean,
Of
if you're
course.
not afraid, what is courage then?
That's
So
exactly right.
yeah, I think that, all of us, no matter how advanced we are in our work, no matter what kind of where our black belt shows up, if it's in taekwondo or some other life mastery, whatever it might be, we all experience fear. And the thing about fear is it can stop you. It can stop you damn cold if you let it. However, what you've been talking about is that 9-hour journey that's just a metaphor, I think, for, hey, fear ain't going to give up on you. You got to stand there in the face of fear all the time. Sorry.
Can you say that again?
Siri heard me say Siri. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, so that's what I think we need to understand. Courage is what shows up when you're feeling fear. And if you do feel that courage coming up, you're also going to feel the fear at the same time, and you're going to do it anyway.
Right. I think that one thing is probably a life mastery, is just to master the ability to move with the feeling.
Right.
And really literally, and it's not always, physically move. Maybe you have to make a phone call.
Right.
Maybe you have to talk to somebody. Maybe you have to be brave about asking for something you need. It can be very little things all the way up to the big things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Courage doesn't have to be super massive. It's not like you have to save the world every time, you feel fear. So
half the battle, maybe more than half, is just showing up. And
yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one too. Yeah. I think all of the battle actually is showing up.
I do too.
Because if you're not there, then the rest of it's irrelevant.
There's no game to play.
That's right.
Yeah.
So showing up and do it anyway. Show up and do it anyway. That's our lesson for today. And we're gonna keep harping back to that. So I want you to talk a little bit more now about brave words and courageous actions.
Well, brave words. Yeah. I think those will get back to the idea that sharing an authentic story, those words feel brave. It feels brave when you haven't shared something about yourself before and you're doing that for the first time. It feels brave when you're sharing, maybe a new story about something that's happened to you. A lot of first times here, right? You got to get brave all over again when you're ready to expose yourself in a different way. Being vulnerable and sharing about yourself is brave, right? Brave words. So speaking and writing brave words is a courageous action. Those things go together, at the same time. And I mean, it's kind of what we were talking about a little bit before, is that I realized I wasn't going to get the confidence or the courage or even the clarity unless I was taking action. If I took the action of that thing I was a little afraid of, you see these things as this wall of fire, and you're looking up at this wall of fire and you're like, no way in heck am I going to go near that wall, right? But the thing is if you would just jump through, you'd look back and you'd realize that wall is about 1 millimeter thick, right? And then you're on the other side of it and you're like, oh, I just jumped through that wall, right? And then now you're feeling a little bit more confident and clear that the action is going to get you, somewhere where you want to be. So action taking is magical. If you want anything in life, you need to start to take some courageous actions.
Yeah. So you're reminding me of a story that I heard at a training that I went to a while back, where it was called, I can't remember the title of the story, but basically the idea is this: you've got these gazelles on the plain, and they're just roaming around, and they're all, just doing their thing. And all of a sudden they see these lions, these young lions, coming up behind them. And of course they run in the opposite direction. And these young lions chase them and chase them and chase them until they get into this really narrowing corridor with some bushes there. And behind those bushes are these giant, big adult lions who are too tired and lazy to chase the guys for the hunt. They leave that to the young ones. So they're standing behind these bushes, and as the gazelles get close, they just rise up and growl. And of course, the loud growl of these big lions scares these gazelles. So what do? They turn around and run back right into the mouth of the enemy that's going to eat them. Now, the irony here is, and this is something that people need to learn, is if those gazelles had realized that these big, loud, lazy, old lions couldn't catch them, they would have run right through. And so I guess the name of the story is Into the Roar. That's the name of the story. So the idea is you got to face your fear. You cannot run away from it, because something else is going to get you.
Yeah.
And something else that's probably even more painful. So face your fear, deal with it, recognize that it is not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt you. And in many ways, it's just there because you've got this reptilian brain that's trying to keep you safe from whatever danger. But run into the fear.
Definitely.
Take a deep breath and go for it.
I think there's more pain and suffering in sitting, waiting around, worrying about what's going to happen if you do the thing. Right. It's going to take you much, much longer in that, rather than just facing it and moving through it, right? It would take a much shorter amount of time to face it and move through it. But wow, we torture ourselves with that, waiting around, overthinking, and what if this and what if that, and tiring.
Well, and one of the things that people seem to be mostly afraid of is, oh my God, if I do this, what is Billy going to think of me?
Yes.
Or what is Joanne going to think of me? And, very often the truth is they're not thinking about you at all. They're thinking about you very little, And if you simply speak your truth and show up as who you really are, people actually will appreciate that. Most people will not judge you harshly for showing up as you really are. So your fear of their judgment is really a completely imaginary one that has no basis in reality.
It's really good to remember that. I caught myself telling that to my teenager the other day when she was worried about how she would look and what people would be staring at her when she was doing a particular thing. I said, honey, they are not paying attention to you. They're only paying attention to what's going on with themselves. Like, don't even worry about it. But we tend to learn this lesson later in life. I don't know why, but you mentioned there's some of the youngins who have learned it faster. So good for them that they can do it a little bit faster. Sometimes I feel like sharing these messages is about helping people not take so long. Like if they hear an idea earlier in their life and they can really incorporate it and put it into play. Wow, wouldn't have that been nice, right? To do that a little bit earlier. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you to Sarah. She just commented, feel the fear and do it anyway, which is kind of what we've been saying. It's a great summary. So thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. She's got to leave, I guess. Anyway, so this whole thing about what other people are thinking about you, that, like I said, they're really not. This came up, I remember, as I started doing my public speaking in Toastmasters, and I would start then mentoring some of the newer members, and I would hear this often, and in fact, science supposedly tells us that one of the greatest fears that we have is the fear of public speaking. But my belief is people aren't afraid of public speaking at all, because the moment you get them talking, you pretty much can't shut them up. So they have no problem talking. It isn't until they say, oh, I have to put myself up on stage and be in the spotlight. That's when they suddenly have this fear.
Yeah.
And it still isn't the fear of public speaking. They're not afraid to talk. They're afraid of what people think. They're afraid of the judgments that they have no idea that people have.
Yes.
And one of the things that I would teach these people, I say, I want you to think about this. The next time somebody else is up on stage, notice how much judgment you're having about them. And they would say to me, it's funny, I'm glad you asked that, because I don't have any judgment at all. In fact, I'm kind of rooting for them.
Yeah, of course.
And I said, good, then you know what everybody else is doing for you when you're on stage.
Right. And if we would just remember that as public speakers, we're there to give to that audience. Us being in total fear doesn't serve anyone, us or them.
Right.
And so, you stand up there and you've got a gift to share, share it with all you have, full on. Yeah. The purpose-driven fear of that. Okay, I know it's in your body and you might be shaking a little bit or whatever is happening. But I will tell you that gets better and better and better with practice. And am I not nervous at all when I stand on a stage? No, I won't tell you that. I get a little bit of that, but I'm so much more focused on the beautiful gift I can give when I stand tall inside of my worthiness and confidence and deliver that message in a powerful way that I can see in the eyes it's being received. That turns me on. So I could flip my switch to worrying about public speaking, or that I take that any day. Right. Exactly. Now, took a while. Not saying that was an overnight trick, but it took a little bit of practice, but it was so worth it.
I think it's the same as riding a bike.
Yes.
The first few times you ride a bike, you might be nervous because you're just not used to doing this thing on two wheels, And, but once you understand how it works and you get used to it, you get more comfortable on the bike. That doesn't mean you're never nervous on the bike, especially if you're driving. I know I find when I'm driving on a road with other cars, I'm very aware and very attentive to what's going on. And I'm saying, okay, I just got to make sure I stay calm, cool, and just keep focused on going straight forward. So these metaphors that we've been bringing up today are all highly relevant metaphors for what we're talking about. We want you to learn to share your heart, share your soul, share the truth of who you are with people, because somebody out there needs to hear those words. Somebody needs to hear your voice. And then start taking action in your life, bringing these courageous actions in your life. That too speaks volumes to other people, and it inspires them and it helps them to grow into the amazing beings that they were meant to be.
Yes, with an exclamation point.
Why don't we talk now just a little bit about I think we've already talked a little bit about this, but I want to go into a bit more detail on the whole subject of courage and what that really, really means. So why don't you share with us your perspective on that?
Oh, my goodness. I really think that it's just, for me, it's been shifting my mindset to doing the things that I really enjoy, no matter what I think others think. It's courage for me has been about prioritizing my own joy selfishly. And I say selfishly in a good way, meaning I'm not going to let people get in the way of me living a life that is high vibe and nourishes me. I take responsibility for that. That took courage to get to the point where I was making those things a priority on a regular basis and really setting the boundaries I needed to set, speaking to people I needed to speak to, shifting my circles if I needed to, choosing things to do for a living that I wanted to do. Oh my gosh, I could go on and on, right? There's a list of those things.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it ties into not letting anyone make my rules for me. And I don't know, I know there are some people out there where that hasn't been a problem. You've been making your rules for your own life for a while, living life on your own terms. For me, it took a while to realize that I had to be responsible for that I could be responsible for that. And what an ultimate freedom that was when I finally figured it out. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like that you talked about this, because I think the word selfish has a kind of negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
And yet what we have done, we have turned ourselves upside down to the point where we go out of our way to appear unselfish in order to gain something for ourselves. It's a real twisty, shadowy kind of behavior. Instead of being honest about the fact that we're trying to make ourselves happy, we pretend that we're trying to make other people happy so that we can be happy.
Yes.
It's a very insidious and dark shadow that I think a lot of us need to address. And so to your point, I think it's courageous to stand up and say, I'm going to take care of myself. I am going to do that, because I don't believe that I can honestly and truthfully support you unless I am making sure that I'm taken care of. These are very important things, and it takes courage to be that kind of selfish.
It does. Yes. Oh my gosh, I so agree with you there. And I hope people listening to this piece will really get that others who are around you that are your important, good friends and community, they get it too and respect it. And if you're getting flack for doing that for yourself, those aren't the right people to hang out with. But when you start to hang out with a community that supports each other in that way, that again, I think I use the term game changer too much a lot, but this is one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is important, and I think we have covered a lot of fabulous stuff here today. And I want to thank you for being here. Is there something you'd like to say to kind of wrap us up before I close us out?
Yeah, let's go back to one of the big questions. It's my favorite thing to finish off with. What if there's something you haven't learned yet that could change everything? Time to be brave.
That's beautiful. What if there's something you haven't learned yet that could change everything? That's a beautiful question.
I really love dwelling in the possibility of that.
And that's what it is. It is an invitation to possibility.
Yes.
It's not the kind of what if that brings fear, but instead the kind of what if that opens up to amazing, beautiful possibilities. So, yeah.
I like it.
And also, you have a special gift on your website at bravehealer.com. Is that right? Do I have that name right?
Yeah, thank you. If you guys are interested in writing, maybe you've been saying you've got a book in you and you just don't know how to start this thing off, I am going to hook you up with a little mini book writing course. This is going to catapult you. It's a 90-minute workshop with a workbook that outlines all of the steps to move through. And I truly hope that you go through it, get with me if you have questions or you need help through it, but it's really going to move you forward if you've been saying that to yourself and not getting it done.
Yeah. And remember, you just got to take that first step. And so all you got to do is go to Laura's website at bravehealer.com. There's a link, a big link there that says click here to start your journey. And you sign up for free and you can get access to that amazing program.
Yes, thank you, David.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Laura, for being here. It's just been such a pleasure as always talking to you. And I always have such fun sharing space with you. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on again. I really, truly appreciate the conversations that you bring to the table in this series, and really know that, you know, your viewers are going to get a lot out of listening to these conversations, opening up their minds, enhancing their awareness about all of these different topics. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And thank you to all of you for watching today's program. Just want to remind you that you can find recordings of this and every other program on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. I truly hope you enjoyed this presentation, and in a few hours you're going to receive a request for feedback from the platform that runs this thing. And it'll have a link in it to a feedback page, and I really would hope that you would take some time to fill out your feedback, because everything you tell us helps. And if you can find it in your heart to give us an authentic 5-star review, well, that always helps. And finally, I just want to remind everybody, please remember the Life Mastery mantra every single day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Well, until we meet again, thank you very much for being here. Again, I'm David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. Bye-bye for now. See you next time.